listening to Lady-ish, where wellness gets unfiltered. This is the podcast where real talk meets whole self-transformation. I am your host, Autumn Noble O'Hanlon. I'm a coach, healer, author, and wellness guide, and I have created this unfiltered space for women who want more out of life, but on their own terms. Every week, we will dive into the messy, beautiful, and often contradictory layers of wellness, covering everything from career shifts and body image to energy healing, intuitive living, fitness, burnout recovery, and creating change that actually sticks. Whether you're chasing a new chapter, healing old wounds, or just trying to reconnect with yourself in a loud, overwhelming world, Lady-ish is here to support your evolution. You can expect honest conversations, coaching wisdom, holistic tools, spiritual insights, and permission to be a little bit of everything and nothing that you're not. Because wellness isn't one size fits all, and neither are you. Welcome back to the podcast, my friends. This week, we are continuing our discussion topic for the month, and that is money and shadow work. And today's topic is the fear of wanting more and why you're not greedy. It seems like today women are really stepping into their power and they're owning their authenticity in a different kind of a way. And I think there's a lot of women out there that we can look to for inspiration around owning our value and owning our worth. But what I find in coaching is that a lot of women on the outside have that very powerful presence. Maybe they have it all together on paper, or just from the outside, it looks like they have their life perfectly. But behind closed doors, when we get into coaching, what I find more often than not is there are some real deep-seated fears around wanting more for themselves. And there's also a lot of judgment kind of tied to wanting more. And so I want to unpack this as part of our discussions this month around money and worthiness, because they're closely tied together. No matter what it is that you're wanting more of, I think there's a lot that we can unpack here. It might be more money, more success, more visibility, or just more ease and simplicity in things. Or maybe it's making a greater impact. For many high achieving women, it's not about their ability or capability to do these things. We're all really good at developing the to-do list and checking things off and executing on the goals. But the problem comes in our subconscious and the thoughts and beliefs that we bring to those checklists that actually hold us back from fully executing in a completely embodied and energetic kind of a way. You can do something actively while also believing that it's not going to work out, and you end up just canceling out the efforts. That's what I want to talk about, because we can do it. The question is there discomfort around it that's going to sabotage our goals? And it's that discomfort and that quiet voice that a lot of us have that's kind of swirling in the background saying, well, it's kind of greedy to want more. Don't you have enough? Shouldn't you be grateful for what you already have? You already have so much. Like, how dare you want more? What's wrong with you? Why are you not happy with what you've got? I hear this so often, and it just breaks my heart, because ladies, we deserve better than all of that garbage. And even though you're like, well, I tell myself these mean things, but I'm still going, you are actually preventing your forward momentum. It's like running a marathon with a ball and chain just dragging you down. So let's just conduct a little experiment here and just see if there might be something hidden there for you to unpack further. I want you to close your eyes and imagine doubling your income and just sit with it and notice what comes up. Do you feel a tightness in your chest, or do you feel expansive? If you're feeling a tightening in your body, what's the first story that comes along with that sensation? That story, that's where the real work begins. And that's what I want to focus on today, because we all have it. And if you're telling yourself that you don't, that is a real sign that there is so much that you have closed off that you're not looking at. And it's a real indication that you need this work more than anything, because we're not connecting with that deeper part of ourselves. We're not even hearing her. And that's something that we can address. And I think we should address because that's the real part of ourselves. And she's in there talking and believing things, whether we hear her or not. But we want to at least start from a place of you're noticing and paying attention what's happening up there. I want to start by talking about this narrative around greed. Most women were not socialized to want more. We're socialized to be agreeable, helpful, and low maintenance and accommodating. And again, I know we're kind of in this movement where a lot of us are stepping into that power, but we're carrying a lot of those beliefs with us unless you've really done the work to unpack those and rewire your brain. There's strong research in social psychology and particularly social role theory showing us that women are rewarded for communal traits and we're penalized for traits like assertiveness and self-promotion. And I've talked about those a little bit on the podcast, I think in January when we were working through identity topics. In fact, there's research that takes this even farther and concluded that women who initiate salary negotiations are often perceived as less likable and more demanding than men who do the exact same thing. And I have to admit, there was a time in my career when I realized I was carrying some of the socialization with me. At this particular time in my career, I was supervising some women attorneys. And I had this one particular woman attorney who was struggling with her compensation. And she was asking me how to go about asking for more money. And this might have even been early on in her career where she hadn't even been hired yet. So she had an initial offer and she wanted to kind of negotiate it. And I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, you should be grateful for what they've offered. That's more than I got when I started. Like, who do you think that you are? And I was judging her. And I stopped myself and I was like, wow, there's some real socialization in there because I don't think I would have had those same thoughts if it were a young male attorney sitting in front of me. And I had to sort of recognize like I have some of that conditioning that was taught to me and I'm just regurgitating it in my own crappy lines of thinking. And so I had to do my own work on that, but it was in that recognition like, wow, this stuff is deep in there and these beliefs around women and whether they should or shouldn't be asking for the same things in the same way that the men are. So I really want you to let that sink in that there is some unconscious bias that I think we all sort of carry that leads to these perceptions of us as being greedy or demanding when we do the same things that our male counterparts do. I think as women, it's certainly on us to do that work and make sure we clean that up in our houses. But I think, unfortunately, we have to be aware that there are people around us that aren't doing that work and carry those biases with them. What ends up happening in those scenarios is that when men ask for more, they're seen as ambitious and sort of taking control and charge of their career. Whereas women, when they ask for more, they risk that social penalty. And I will say, I have seen it play out in the careers of countless women attorneys who ask for more and have a good foundation for their request. And it kind of sours some of their social capital, which is unfortunate. Luckily for a lot of the women that I work with, they bring a lot to the table. And so it kind of becomes neither here nor there whether or not people like them because they're good at what they do. And when they start owning that more, people get over the social part of it. But regardless, your nervous system is going to pick up on that. And so even if you consciously believe in equality, your body may still associate wanting more with that relational risk because you've probably got experiences in your life where that was a consequence and your nervous system filed that away. And as humans, we are wired to avoid rejection. So when you feel that discomfort around wanting more, it's easy to say, well, that's just greed and I don't want to be greedy. No, it is conditioning. It's calibration. It's your nervous system that learned expansion might cost you connection and social capital. And so I think a lot of people say, well, I'm feeling really greedy. I don't think that's the case. I think it's your nervous system recognizing there's risk here. And I think that's an important distinction for us to own and recognize. There's also another layer at play here. What we have found in research is that when a child grows up around any kind of financial instability, they develop sort of a zero-sum thinking. So it's this belief that if one person gains, someone else loses. And psychology research tells us that that bias is incredibly common. So if someone in your family struggled financially, earning more than them may feel very disloyal to you because it's a trade-off, right? You're earning more, which means that they're going to have less by comparison. It's that zero-sum trade-off. If you were praised for being easy or not needing much, wanting more may feel like a personality betrayal because people have this idea around who you are. And when you show up contrary to that, people struggle with that and they bristle against that. So when you start growing beyond that early environment around money, something inside you probably tightens. And it's not because you're greedy, as we just discussed, but it's because there could be a part of you that feels like you're crossing a loyalty line. If I get more, everybody else gets less. And it's kind of this subconscious lesson that we learn that there's always a trade-off. Someone gets more, that means someone else gets less. And that's embedded in us and kind of causes us to collapse a little bit around expansion because we don't want to do that to other people. It's, tied to our compassion and loyalty to those around us. The last really important piece of this little money puzzle that we're kind of putting together is something I've talked a lot about in coaching. And it's this idea that your brain prefers predictability, not possibility. From a neuroscience perspective, uncertainty activates our amygdala, and that's the brain's threat detection system. So if you're thinking about earning more, changing something dramatic about your lifestyle, your brain sees this as a survival threat. And that growth can start to equal uncertainty and distress. So more income could actually sound like, oh, it's just a lot more responsibility and stress and more expectations and more exposure and visibility, which ultimately means more criticism. So your brain kind of starts spinning around all the negative reasons associated with wanting more. And it doesn't mean that any of that's true. It just means that your brain is responding as it should. It's a change. And so our amygdala gets activated. And now these are all threats, and your brain's just trying to keep you safe. Even positive changes have this result. They activate that stress response system because it's unfamiliar. And so we have to recognize that even though my brain's telling me all these negative things, it doesn't make them true. It's just our biology. And so it's okay to set them aside and not listen to those worries and let them hold us back. There's also this kind of similar concept around upper limit problems. And it's this idea that we each have a tolerance level for success and happiness. And when we exceed that level, we subconsciously create stress to bring ourselves back to familiar territory. So it's like we self-sabotage because we don't know what this new threshold of success and happiness is. We don't get that. We sort of maxed out and we need to go back to our own sandbox over here. What I see this looking like in coaching is that we overwork after a raise, which often leads to burnout, missing things you wouldn't normally miss because we're stretched too thin. Similarly, we spend impulsively after a really big month because we're not familiar with having excess income sitting around. Or you minimize your success and play it down, or we raise the bar immediately so that you can't enjoy a milestone. And I see that one with every single person I have ever seen make partner. They make partner, they don't celebrate it, they don't honor it, they give them like a hot second of being happy about it. And then it's like, I got to bill more, I got to get more clients, I got to do this, I got to do that. And we just don't allow ourselves to enjoy these successes because we're not comfortable with that level of success. None of that discomfort is because it's greedy. It's just a capacity ceiling that we've reached and we've moved over into discomfort. So we have to think about expanding that capacity ceiling as it relates to wealth and success, because without doing that, we're just always living in that discomfort and self-sabotaging to get back to the safe space. With all of that being said, I want to take a minute just to talk about greed. And this was a big one for me because if you listen to the earlier episode on money stories, I had a lot of money stories around wealthy people, kind of who they were and what their values were. And at the root of a lot of that was this idea of greed. And so let's just take a moment to define exactly what greed is here so we can be clear when and where it applies. Greed is taking something at the expense of another person. It's hoarding assets and wealth from a space of fear and protectionism. It's extracting wealth and keeping it away from others without contributing. And so we're holding it just for ourselves. Wanting to be paid fairly for your expertise and your value is not greed. Wanting your work to feel sustainable is not greed. It's okay to have a sustainable work schedule and make a lot of money. That's all right. And that doesn't make you greedy. Wanting to build your wealth so that you can create safety and options is not greed. Expansion is totally different. It's increasing your capacity. It's allowing for more of an impact, more contribution, and more choice. And that is what we're really talking about when I'm speaking to growing your wealth and attracting more wealth. But if your worth has historically felt very conditional and tied to overworking and over delivering or proving yourself, then wanting more without earning it through exhaustion is going to feel really dangerous and feel like you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be relaxing and taking a vacation after getting a raise or a big promotion. You should be working more. And that all comes from that historical conditioning, because somewhere along the way you learned, I have to work harder than everyone else to deserve this. And I work with a lot of women who are, first generation college graduates. And I work with a lot of women who are first generation immigrants and they're professionals now. And there is a tremendous heaviness that they carry with them around this idea and deserving more. And the more I see them climb and grow and generate more revenue, there's always this, yes, but I'm paid really well and I really shouldn't want more because they pay me so well and I have a really great work schedule. So I shouldn't want this for myself. It's really in there. And sometimes it makes them feel like cheating, like this shouldn't be possible for me to have ease and a really big income. And I want you to really hear me when I say that that's not cheating and it's not greed. It's evolution and evolving yourself and letting go of those stories around what it's supposed to mean to acquire wealth and to want more for yourself and what that requires of us. Another fear I often see kind of beneath all of these fears is the belief around exposure. It's not about the money. It's about, if I make more, will I be judged? If I outgrow my peers or surpass my peers, will I lose belonging? If I slow down and I earn well, who am I then? And what are people going to say about me? There is a lot of research on imposter phenomenon showing that high achieving women frequently attribute success to luck or effort rather than ability. And this correlates with lower negotiation frequency and compensation ceilings. If you secretly fear that you're going to be found out, right? The whole imposter syndrome thing, like you don't belong and they're going to figure it out, wanting more and asking for more, of course, is going to feel risky because more visibility feels like more scrutiny and more evaluation. And we don't want that because we want to stay in the shadows and stay hidden. We don't want them to know that we don't belong here. So again, it's not greed to want more. It's believing that you deserve it and moving beyond that imposter syndrome. And that shift is going to feel tremendously uncomfortable. You're just trying to protect yourself from an evolutionary perspective. Your brain is just trying to protect yourself. And that's that discomfort that comes with moving out of imposter syndrome and choosing to believe something else about yourself. One of the others I often see with women, particularly those who are sort of first generation professionals, is discomfort around receiving. And receiving can be very vulnerable because it's allowing someone to care for you in some kind of a way. In conversations around money, we often talk about earning, but we don't typically talk about receiving and what that means. Receiving requires us to be seen, to be valued, to be paid without over explaining why we deserve to be paid that way, and allowing someone to say, this is worth that amount. There's a tremendous amount of discomfort that comes with just letting that be and not having to like explain it or like overly thank them. That's a vulnerability. And that can be really hard for us to develop that skill if it's something we're not used to. Because if you've built your whole identity on proving yourself, then receiving without strain and proof is going to feel very unfamiliar. And that makes sense, but we have to recognize that that's part of the discomfort here. It's not because we're wrong for asking. There's a lot of discomfort that comes from this. There's a lot of belief around what you have to do to get more and our inability to receive. It's a muscle that we're just not good at using. So that's going to feel weird and hard. So when you feel discomfort at the idea of more, whether it's more money, more ease, more recognition, I want you to really pause and take a beat around, I'm just being greedy. And instead ask yourself, what part of me feels unsafe here? What part of me believes that this is going to cost me something? I'm going to have to give in order to prove I deserve this. And whose voice is telling me that this is too much? I'm asking for too much. I originally started this work focusing on women lawyers. And over the years, I've sort of evolved into working with women of all professional backgrounds, because what I have found again and again is that these socialization challenges, cultural challenges, and nervous system issues that we've sort of developed because of all of those things are really prevalent in women of any kind of a background. And I started this work because I want more women in places of power. And I want women to pursue more meaningful lives of alignment. And I think this work is really at its core because it invites us to explore and consider worthiness, value, contribution in our identity. Money is just sort of the red herring here for some of those deeper questions. And I think our skill set around money that's really tied to worth and being able to receive value that matches our own value that we're giving, those skills are the skills that are going to allow us as women to get into those spaces where historically we maybe haven't been. And so I know this month we're talking about money, but it really is so much more than that. I share all that to say that if this episode is stirring up something in you, some type of discomfort, maybe it's a tightness, resistance, maybe you're feeling defensive and you're arguing with me over the airwaves, that's really good information to know, because there's usually something there. If we're feeling defensive, there's a good chance that something I said here is landing true for you and your nervous system isn't liking it. And I think that's worth unpacking. In sum today, I really want you to recognize that understanding that what you're experiencing is probably not greed. That's step number one. But furthermore, I want you to take away the notion that expanding your capacity to want more calmly from a place of peace and confidence, it requires practice. It requires repetition to rewire those neural pathways, to regulate our nervous system differently and fully integrate those new beliefs in how we're showing up. Inside the full 30-day money and shadow journey on my premium podcast, we go deeper into increasing your tolerance for success, regulating your nervous system around visibility and wealth, rewriting inherited scarcity narratives, practicing embodied receiving and being open to receiving, and expanding your financial identity beyond those old ceilings. The first 7 days are available here. If you haven't checked them out, they're absolutely free and give you kind of a little taste of what's available on the premium podcast. But if you're ready to continue, the full series is available inside the premium space. There is no urgency. There's no rush. It's $5 a month. Start when you want, stop when you want. This is just an invitation because this work is not about chasing more. It's about learning to become women who can want more without shame, and then follow through with that in your actions. Because we're not greedy for wanting more. We're just growing and evolving, and growth will always feel unfamiliar before it feels safe. All right, my friends, I will see you on the next episode where we will continue this discussion around money, identity, and worthiness this month. As always, thank you so much for listening, and thanks for sharing with your friends.